All right, well, today I will be talking about how to tell if you're an average looking male. Now, this video could honestly be like 10 hours long, and this topic is so nuanced as, most of the people on the planet fall into the category of an average looking man. This is more of a, in general, this will happen to you more frequently type guide. This is definitely not bulletproof, and there will be many exceptions to this, but these are really based off of my own personal experiences being an average looking guy for the vast majority of my life. The first reason has to do with facial expressions. What I'd like for you to do is pay attention the next time a woman looks at you. As an average looking guy, you will tend to get very neutral and unenthusiastic facial expressions when a woman is looking at you. When you're speaking with a woman, their face tends to remain neutral throughout the interaction. If you say something funny or interesting, this may change that interaction. They may slightly raise their eyebrows. That may cause her to become more interested in you. But overall, they're looking at your face and they're giving you a neutral facial expression because there are really no features that they particularly find attractive. Another way you can tell with facial expressions is when you smile at a girl, do they give you a full smile back, or do they tend to give you either a slight smile or a blank look? The vast majority of the times, when you smile at a girl as an average looking guy, most of the time, in my experience, they either tend to look away quickly, or they tend to give you a very slight smile, but it's never going to be a full toothy type smile where you can kind of see the crimps underneath their eyes. You won't see that glee type of expression on their face. The second reason has to do with dating apps. An average looking guy will typically get 1 to 3 matches a day on Tinder, Bumble, or Hinge. Now, this obviously depends on the city that you're in. Obviously, if you're in a bigger city, let's just say like Milwaukee or Kansas City or Detroit, you may get a few, maybe 5 to 6 matches a day, but you tend not to have a lot of options on online dating apps. And the main reason it comes down to this is there's so many more men on dating apps than women, and that average looking guys typically do not have anything about their looks or about their profile that sets them apart from the rest of the competition. And the rest of the competition on dating apps is going to be mostly average to above average looking guys. And there's just nothing about your profile or your pictures that really stand out to get a lot of girls to really swipe right on you. If you're a tall average looking guy, you're going to have more success. And a lot of it does have to do with, women are very attracted to tall men. But what it also does is when you're tall, when you're a certain height, whether it's 5'11" or 6 foot or 6'2", you meet the filter tools for women's preferences for height. So a tall average looking guy, let's just say he's average looking, but he's 6'2" or he's 6'4", he's going to get more matches than, an average looking guy who's, let's just say 5'9" or 5'7" or, even 5'10". Just mainly meeting those preferences can really do a lot for the amount of matches that you have. And I think it's one of the biggest ways to tell what your market value is these dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge. For average looking guys, you're really not going to be getting a lot of matches. And, even the matches you are going to be getting, a lot of them may not respond. They may tend to be more flaky. You may get some girls' numbers, but a lot of those kind of fall through. And that's one of the pitfalls of dating apps, even for good-looking guys. It's just, it's very tough. The next reason has to do with, walking around places and making eye contact with people. If you're an average-looking guy, you typically won't have that many women lock eyes with you walking down the street or in a place like the mall or even the grocery store. Some exceptions to this would be an average looking guy who's tall, An average looking guy with like really good hair that stands out. Some guys have like a really good hairstyle. Their hair may be very thick, it may be very long, and it just kind of catches a lot of women's eyes. Or sometimes it's an average looking guy that has like a very unique fashion sense that kind of stands out in that area to kind of capture their attention. But the vast majority of times, though, most women will just kind of walk right by you without even giving you a glance. They saw you. Don't get me wrong. They saw you walking by them. And they looked at you, the corner of their eye, but nothing registered on their radar for them to want to lock eyes with you. Occasionally, you will lock eyes with a girl as an average looking guy. And usually that's when you had a feature that she was drawn to really in that moment, in that second she glanced at you. Sometimes it could be, let's just say you're in the line at, waiting for the cashier, and the girl in front of you turns around to see who's behind you. She looks up and, sees you have blue eyes. Maybe she really likes blue eyes or green eyes. And in that moment, she saw that and she locked eyes with you because she was attracted to you. The reason she locked eyes with you is that there was something about it's usually like your facial looks, but it could be something else that she's drawn to. Therefore, she's locking eyes with you to kind of give you a signal that she's interested. The vast majority of the time, if you ever see a woman turn her head the other way while you're walking by her, she's probably not into you, bro. This isn't always the case, as women do this for guys they're attracted to as well, and sometimes they turn their head the other way because they're nervous. But good-looking guys are going to get that a lot less, as more girls will be checking them out and locking eyes with them. The next reason has to do with your bone structure. In general, most average-looking guys, they just lack strong facial aesthetics. That's what makes them average-looking. They typically lack traditionally good-looking features, such as a chiseled jawline, a strong prominent chin, high cheekbones, and hunter eyes. The features that really stand out, they're not very common, and typically good-looking guys tend to have some or all of these features. That's not to say there aren't good-looking men who don't have these features, but in general, good-looking guys tend to resemble a lot of those like stronger, more masculine or pretty boy type features. The next reason has to do with loud environments. I mentioned this before in my nightclub video, but environments such as crowded bars, nightclubs, and concert venues, average-looking men tend to get lost in the crowd, lost in the sauce, so to say. And this has to do when there are hundreds of people kind of packed into a small area. Women tend to get primal, and they tend to be drawn to either very tall men, men that really stand out in the crowd. So, men, over 6 feet, or particularly really over 6'2", 6'4", or guys that just have very attractive faces. Most other guys in these loud environments, if they're not approaching women, they're going to tend to just kind of get lost in the sauce. Also in these loud environments, this is one of the only places average looking guys will most likely get ignored. And this has to do with mainly that the music's so loud and, they just don't want to have a conversation with someone they're not really attracted to because the music is so distracting and they're really focusing on that. The next reason has to do with how service workers interact with you. When you walk up to a cashier, I'm just using a cashier as an example because this is so frequent. The vast majority of the time, the cashier, if it's a woman, they're either going to give you a blank kind of look or a slight smile, but it won't be very flirtatious or enthusiastic. It's more of a friendly smile because that's their job. Another example could be a bartender. So let's just say you walk up to a bartender as an average looking male. What I've noticed is the vast majority of the time, They will give you a very neutral look, and they'll typically be very unbiased towards you. They'll typically ask you, what can I get for you? And that's really going to be the end of the conversation. Whereas, with good looking men, they tend to get a different reaction from bartenders sometimes. Bartenders in some cases will tend to have, more of a flirtatious look on their face, and they may engage in banter with good looking guys. Instead of asking them, what can I get for you? They might say something like, oh, what are you having tonight? Or they may say something like, oh, this, I guess you want this drink. They're going to kind of have that in with the bartender. Whereas an average looking guy, there's no banter. It's really pour your drink and hand you the check. Another example would be servers. So as an average looking guy, female servers are going to be pretty indifferent towards you. They will be polite. They'll take your order. They might check back once or twice asking how the food was, but they're not really engaging in any sort of dialogue with you. They're not really striking up a conversation with you or the group. However, for good-looking men, servers definitely engage in banter. They might, let's just say you order really spicy wings, or you order a certain item that's not really ordered too much. The server may comment and say something like, "Oh, that's really spicy. Are you sure you can handle that?" Or they might comment on the item that the good-looking guy ordered, and kind of give their recommendation on it. Whereas, let's say an average-looking guy ordered that same item, they may say something like, "Okay, great," and end the conversation there. I have experienced both sides of this. After doing a considerable amount of looks maxing and losing 110 pounds and having 2 hair transplants, back in 2017, I actually went to Hooters with a buddy of mine and was able to get a Hooters girl's number. This was at a time when I definitely looked my best. I was around 10 to 12% body fat, and I had built a decent amount of muscle. We actually ended up going on a few dates, but nothing ever long-term had stemmed from this. Prior to this, though, most servers are pretty indifferent towards me. Point being, a server, a bartender, cashier, as an average looking guy, it's just a transaction. The next reason has to do with flakiness of dates. Dates will tend to flake on you a fair majority of the time, or either ignore you completely. This can happen to good looking guys as well, but nowhere near as frequently. The reason behind this is an average looking guy, you're in the same league as the vast majority of people she's chatting with, and before she meets you in person, there's typically nothing in particular about you that stands out. Average looking guys have typically gotten the lines of, "Hey, something came up. Sorry, I got to cancel." I've gotten that so many times, or, "I'm not feeling well. I can't hang out tonight." Just more of those frequent flaky lines. As an average looking guy, you're going to get those more often. Sometimes it will be a legitimate reason that she needs to cancel. Like maybe it's a family member that's sick, or they're actually not feeling well, or it's their dog. But you get the point. As an average looking guy, you've definitely experienced this a good bit in the past, if not a lot in the past. Next reason has to do with engaging in conversation. So as an average looking guy, you really have to be on point with your communication skills. You need to have funny stories. You need to know how to lead a conversation. Most of the time on dates or just in general interactions with women, as an average looking guy, they're not going to be asking you many questions. You'll be leading the conversation the vast majority of the time. Whereas with good looking guys, a lot of women will be asking you lots of questions on dates. Their looks tend to carry them through most of the interaction, and the woman is willing to kind of put in more work on that date. The next reason has to do with after date rejections. So average looking men will tend to get rejected far more than good looking guys after date. Some of the most frequent lines you'll hear are, "It was nice meeting you, but I didn't feel a spark." Or they'll say something like, "I really enjoyed my time with you. I'm not ready for anything serious. You're going to get those lines. I mean, good looking guys may get those from time to time as well. And there could be so many reasons outside of your looks that led her to say this, but your looks definitely still play a big part in moving the relationship forward. I can say I've gotten both these lines many, many times, both when I was average looking and when I was decently attractive. But I can say for certain I've gotten more of that line when I was more in the average looking range. There are two big reasons I see this playing out. You know, she sees your profile and you meet her looks threshold. She has a good time with you on the date, but when she's sitting across the table from you, I think from a black pill perspective, she may notice the asymmetries on your face or any other minor or major flaw that you have. And she might not have noticed those flaws when she was looking at your pictures on, Tinder or Bumble. To her, you might have looked better on the apps. And now that she sees you in person, she doesn't think you look as good. Another reason is she may have actually saw a slight connection with you or even a strong connection, but she may have gone out with a better looking guy that same week and she's more attracted to him. So she feels bad and she doesn't want to lead you on. So she ends up, sending you that line and saying, hey, it was nice meeting you, but I didn't feel a spark. This definitely happens. And, it's biology and pre-selection at the end of the day. From personal experience, I had actually had this happen to me a few years back. I had a really good first date with a girl. I thought we vibed really well. We had a lot in common. We both liked outdoor stuff. We both kind of grew up the same way. And after the next day, she sent me a text saying, I had a great time with you last night, but I wanted to be honest and say that I didn't see a spark. A few weeks later, I see her on Instagram and she is putting up a relationship photo with another guy. And, when I look deeper at the picture, this guy is, let's just say he's noticeably better looking than me. This plays out a lot, it's like I said, it's competition at the end of the day. Another example that I had personally was I had gone on a date with a girl from Hinge that was, relatively attractive. And the same thing had happened. She texted me saying, I had a great time with you last night, but, we should just be friends. You're a great guy, but the spark just wasn't there for me. A few months later, I see her on Instagram and little behold, she's dating a guy that's also noticeably better looking than me. Both of those examples, they happened when I was around the high tier normie range. After I had 2 hair transplants and I was in pretty decent shape. But even at that time, I really wasn't like fully black pilled and I hadn't lean maxed yet. And I'd still had some under eye bags as well. So, it's tough. It's tough when those things happen. It's tough to deal with, but that's the raw truth a lot of the time. It's something you're gonna have to deal with as an average looking guy. It's at the end of the day, she didn't feel the spark, not because of your personality, but because she really wasn't that physically attracted to you. When a woman meets you in person, she really knows within a very short period of time whether she's attracted to you. And when you get those rejection lines or the lines around that she didn't feel a spark, I'd bet that it has more to do with looks than your personality and trying to connect with her. The next reason has to do with when a girl pulls other people into a conversation with you. So sometimes when you're talking to a woman as an average looking man, this may be at a bar, this may be at a party or some sort of get together. You'll notice that she'll pull in one of her friends or another guy she may be more attracted to you into the conversation you guys are having. So sometimes you'll be having a conversation and, she'll be looking around. She might be pulling out her phone. You can tell she's kind of getting noticeably bored. And sometimes it's, you could be saying interesting things, but because she's not physically attracted to you, she wants to pull someone else into the conversation to make it more comfortable for her. Another reason has to do with other factors. So as an average looking guy, other factors like your fashion, confidence, charisma, sense of humor, money and status, masculinity, start to come into play. So to give you an example, if you're not dressed well as an average looking guy, you're not wearing tight clothing, clothing that really fits you or helps you stand out, this could kind of really make or break you. Whereas more of a good looking guy, they can get away with dressing poorly. They might be wearing baggy clothing or clothes that don't match at all. But as an average looking guy, you can't afford to not have some sort of fashion sense. And I think the same goes with other factors as well. The differences in attractiveness between average looking guys, it's going to tend to vary from woman to woman. But for average looking guys, the attractiveness level tends to be very close together. There's not like an exponential difference between one guy to the other. One guy might have really good hair, whereas another guy might have just decent hair, but he might be a few inches taller. From a looks perspective, there's not much of a difference. So, average looking guys, they can tend to compete, vigorously with each other, for girls and relationships. And they're going to tend to push for the relationship a lot more than the woman. Whereas if you're a good looking guy, women will be pushing for the relationship with you. And there's little to no competition with other guys, unless you live in a big city. Like, I think the big four are like New York, Miami, Las Vegas, or Los Angeles. You'll have more competition from other good looking men, but in most places, let's just, take, El Paso, Texas, or Reno, Nevada, or Sacramento, California. If you're a good looking guy, you're kind of going to be at the top of the heap in those places. And you're not really going to have to worry too much about someone stealing your girl. As an average looking man, well, you definitely do. The next reason has to do with your dating history. This isn't foolproof. Some average looking guys, have had maybe more relationships. Some average looking guys may have only had a few, but as an average looking guy, you've mostly dated girls who were either below average looking or around your same level. As an average looking guy, you may have lucked out with a more attractive woman, but in those cases, an average looking guy, they tend to have other factors going for them. The most notable would be money, status, or sometimes they're just very fun to be around and they have a large social circle. As an average looking guy, you typically have to either build, as an average looking guy, to get very attractive women, you typically either have to build a very interesting lifestyle or you need to have some sort of resources. It's not always money, but you need to have some sort of connections, or you really do need to be, very charismatic, very good with people to help you stand out from the sea of other thousands of average looking guys that are competing for the same girls. A really good example I have is I know a girl who is objectively about a 7 on the looks scale by most guys' standards. She was dating a guy who I would say he's objectively a 5, about 2 points lower than her on the looks scale. He was 5'9", had a slightly receding hairline, nothing, very facially attractive, wasn't in the best shape. So, when you look at them together, you're thinking, oh, she's noticeably attractive than him. Like, what does he have going for him? In his particular case, and this is just one example, his dad actually owns a relatively large financial company, and he has a house. It's his dad's house, but the house is in a very prestigious beach town in Florida. So, in his college group, he was kind of the center of that friend group. And, he would invite a lot of his friends down to his parents' beach house in the summer. And, that was a big factor. He was in a fraternity, and, I think the one summer he had his fraternity and some sorority girls come down there and stay at the house. Had he come from an average family, sure, maybe he's, maybe that same guy may be able to, be with her, but it's probably not as likely. He might not have stood out enough to get a long-term relationship, with her being much more attractive. This isn't to, say that average-looking guys can't get more attractive women, but in my experience, it will be very difficult to get women that are much noticeably better looking than you. You really do need to have some sort of X factor about you that helps you stand out from like hundreds of other guys. And if it's not your looks, it needs to be something substantial. The next reason is lack of interest from relatives. As an average looking guy, you may get a light compliment here or there from your aunt or your grandmother, but you can tell based on their facial expression and their tone of voice that it's not very genuine or enthusiastic. A frequent one you may hear is, you look really nice today. You could be wearing a suit or like a dress shirt, and she may make that comment, or she may even call you handsome, but it's more of like you look handsome today. And you can tell there's no depth behind it. Whereas if you're actually handsome, your aunt, your grandmother, other relatives, they're going to be more interested in your life. They're going to ask you more about your job, ask you jokingly, who's the lucky lady? Who are you dating? Where are you traveling to this summer? That's the kind of treatment you're going to get when you're actually handsome. When you're average looking, your relatives, it's kind of a big black pill. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed this, but they're just not that interested in you, and they're not interested in your life. The next reason has to do with being in mid-conversation with people. So as an average looking guy, you'll tend to experience that you'll notice some women will tend to lose interest in the conversation after a few minutes. They won't necessarily walk away like they would to a sub-5 male, but they'll tend to give you very short answers. They're not really going to be one-word answers, but they're not really going to give you a whole lot. They'll be really looking around a decent amount, kind of looking for something that's more appealing. It might be a better looking guy, or they might be looking around to see where the fun is. And they're only going to be really enthusiastic mid-conversation when you say something interesting or you say something really funny to kind of spark a good a conversation that leads to something better. The next reason has to do with her friends and family. As an average looking guy, her friends and family are going to tend not to be very excited or enthusiastic about you. They might like you as a person. They might think you're a good guy, but they just don't seem very interested in you. When you go to family gatherings, it's more of a hi, how are you? Or you better treat her well type interaction. But if you're a good looking guy, their family and friends might give you some compliments. So as an example, I was dating this girl back a few years ago. Took me to a family gathering she was having. This was a few years after having 2 hair transplants. What had happened was a huge black pill moment for me. Her aunt came up to her and I in the kitchen and said to me, "Wow, you've got really good hair and you're cute." When she said this, it was ironic because I do have a decent head of hair now after having those 2 hair transplants, but I still use a lot of Topic and gel to spike up my hair. And that's the Topic with the gel and other hair products, like make me appear to have a full head of hair. I definitely still have some thinning in the front, and I still have a thin spot in the back, but I just cover it up with product. But if I had showed up as a bald fat guy, I probably would have been ignored or like barely spoken to by her family. It was just definitely very eye-opening, to say the least. The last reason has to do with after the relationship ends. As an average looking guy, you tend to be replaced a lot quicker after a relationship. Girls will say things like, what was I thinking dating him? Or, I'm so glad I'm done with him. And they're very happy to move on to a new relationship. Whereas, when they end it with a good looking guy, or if a good looking guy breaks up with them, a lot of the times it takes a girl a long time to move on. And, they tend to even go back to them much more often. And sometimes, like even years later, they think back to that relationship and think, man, like I really wish that worked out. One of the last ways to tell if you're average looking is how often you get polite rejections. As an average looking guy, you're going to get a lot of polite rejections. A lot of girls actually won't mind talking to you for a couple minutes, sometimes even 10 minutes, sometimes longer. They don't see you as an attractive guy, or also someone they would be judged for talking to. However, they typically won't be very attracted to you either. And there won't be a lot about you physically that will lead them to want to stay in the conversation and stay engaged. A lot of the time they'll be looking around the room, their body language may be a bit standoffish, they may have their arms crossed, their feet may be pointed away from you, and a lot of the time they'll find an excuse to leave the conversation, such as saying, I've got to get back to my friends, or hey, it was nice meeting you, but I've got to get out of here. You're definitely going to get a lot of nice to meet yous as an average looking man. This also happens to good looking guys, but typically most girls won't mind talking to a good looking guy all night. They're typically much longer than they would an average looking guy, as they're more drawn to them and they're going to be more engaged in that conversation. And here's a bonus one. If the girl you were dating tells you that she is still stuck on her ex, well, you're probably average looking. Like I said, this is not a 100% guide, and there are going to be so many nuances for average looking guys. There are going to be some girls that will think an average looking guy is actually good looking. There's going to be a lot more subjectivity with average looking guys and how women view them. Some girls might rate you a 4, and some girls might rate you a 7. Yeah, that's my guide on how you can tell if you're an average looking man. Feel free, if you got value out of this, feel free to give it a like. Feel free to comment below, and feel free to subscribe. Until next time, take care.